One of the things that my professor of geography, who I've often talked about in my podcast, one of the things that he discussed that I've already, again, communicated, I just want to discuss that a little bit more. He talked about how the culture out here on the East Coast is 400 years before whatever culture came to be and exist out west. So culturally, the way people behave and act on the East Coast, those who are from the East Coast originally, families of the East Coast culture, it's a lot different than the West Coast. Now, naturally, there's always going to be someone who says, Growth, I disagree. It's the same shit. Fucking both coasts, this, and that. Well, that's that person's opinion. What I know from my experience is that on the East Coast, you have a lot of traditional families, a lot of families that are traditional families. And yes, you have that on the West Coast as well. But the East Coast is different in its traditions. It has hundreds of years of culture before the West was won. So U.S. American culture, as it developed here in the Northeast before out West there. And it took hundreds of years for it to develop to the point that it is at now. So in that, some people often forget that Washington State, California, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, those states were entered into the Union at a time later than when New York was established, Philadelphia and Connecticut and Maine and Delaware and Rhode Island, so on, etc. Now, I know some of you out there are like, Grove, that's basic U.S. American history. Right. In the era that we all come from, those of us who know the history of the United States, keep in mind, the educational system today is not what it fucking used to be. So, I'll give you an example. International travelers, I meet them all the time, every day. International students, international business persons, New York, the Northeast, this part of the country, this is an international hub. Now, I know there's always the argument that California has 40 million people and is double the population of what we have here in New York. I get that. But also keep in mind, we have the Statue of Liberty. We have the Empire State Building. We're the Empire State. This is the Big Apple. This is where a lot of immigrant families got their start. Not California, despite California's population size. Now, yes, obviously, California has its percentage of immigrant families that immigrated to the U.S., naturally, like any state in the Union. But iconically speaking, New York, Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, come on. This is where traditionally in the history books, textbooks, movies, stories, and real true histories, this is the state that is looked upon as the beginning of a new life in the United States. So, in that, given the history of New York and the Northeast, the Pilgrims and everything that took place, Plymouth Rock and so on, the history isn't so well known to international folks who are here for school. For example, students at NYU. I've taken courses through NYU. And so I meet people from all over. I meet people from every conceivable university. I've met people from Princeton. I've met people from Harvard. I've met people from here. I've met people from there. MIT, you name it. Anywhere out here, Boston, like I said, Philadelphia, Chicago, Illinois, every major school, Berkeley, back in California, met people from Cornell. I've met people from Yale. I've met people from all the top institutions because of the type of work that I do. I've worked in government. I've been at the Pentagon. I've been at different agencies, DOD. And Sen is saying, why tell me? Just send the beats. Because, bro, I just wanted to let you know that I have beats, bro. And I will, of course, send them, brother. That's a no-brainer. But I get it. I should have just sent him over. And, but I just wanted to see if he was, because Sen is at the military base. I won't say which one because it's confidential information, but Sen is at the base as an employee. Yeah, man, we stepped up our game. So I've worked in military installations on military computer networks, and I've been involved in law enforcement leading up to and after 9/11. And I've done a lot of things that are incongruent with when I was in a gang when I was a kid. When I was a lawbreaker when I was a kid, a lot of folks never thought that I would be on the other side of the law. But look, I work in intel. I don't work on domestic petty shit. I don't have anything to do with fucking the narco shit, the street drug fucking shit. I work in foreign and international intel. I monitor different areas of the world of foreign intelligence, and I coordinate information with different agencies. And we do some cyber shit. We do some shit in the field. The point is that the culture on the U.S. East Coast, yes, I had to prove myself. Yes, some of my friends from childhood colleagues are still reeling like, Grove, you were in a gang and you were like throwing ninja stars and like we used to like make like improvised explosives and like blow shit up on the playground. And I'm like, right, that's when we were kids, but now I'm an adult and yeah, my days of crime are over. I chose this path. So, yeah, I mean, I also fucking had to pay a fortune to go to school and prove that I could do this shit. When people were like naysayers, like mockers and scoffers like, Grove, you're crazy. Grove is delusional. Well, I moved to the U.S. East Coast when motherfuckers never thought I was gonna do it, and I did it. And I told them a long time ago, I was like, yo, this shit out here is limited, man. I mean, fuck, just committing crimes every day, selling drugs every day, and guns and racketeering and shit. Man, I ain't trying to RICO, you know what I mean? And I'm going back to school. And furthermore, you know what? I'm going to the Far East. They're like, Grove says he's going to the East Coast. Ha ha ha, Grove is tripping. Well, Grove's here now. So, the homies are like, damn, Grove wasn't playing. Nah, man, I wasn't fucking playing. But I can see how they thought I was because we used to sit around, smoke weed, and sell drugs and guns. And fucking, we were involved in some gang shit. And back then, it didn't seem like we were going anywhere. I'm just saying, man. Other than the hood, But yeah, man, I knew. I was like, fuck this shit, man. Gotta walk away from it. You know what I mean? The homies are the homies, but the lifestyle, gotta walk away from it, man. Man, much love for the Riverside 151. But we had to take it. I had to take it worldwide. I was like, yo, this story, this history of the West Coast and the EVT, I've got to take it to the international level. I have to counterbalance out the evil shit we did, which is what I just said. Drugs, guns, crimes, pulling licks, doing this, doing that. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yo, for all the shit we were doing on the streets, man, I got to do something good for society. I got to use all this shit that we learned and we developed in terms of tradecraft when we were doing fucking evil, wicked shit. You know, pulling licks and fucking heists and shit like that. I'm just like, yo, for real? Like, nah, man. I got to do something good for society, man. So, I've often talked about this, and I'm not the first person to turn a new leaf. You know, after a childhood and young adult life of crime, to then become a crime fighter. I'm just saying, man. I know how criminals operate because I was one. And it wasn't cool, and I don't embellish it. I mean, I rap about it sometimes, and, you know, it's a Hollywood, you know, soundtrack type shit now, you know, in the rap sense of it all. But, you know, I don't glorify it or embellish it. Not really. I mean, for rap purposes, I mean, I'll talk about, you know, selling fucking dope and shit and gun running. But I also intersperse the raps with coded messages about doing the right shit. So, yeah, CT ops, counterterrorism. I mean, man, I had to prove that I could do this shit, and it wasn't fucking, it wasn't easy. I'm just saying, man, it took a long time, man. I had to go from this agency to that agency, from this agency to that agency. And, man, to be a government defense contractor, you got to bankroll that shit yourself in the beginning before the U.S. Gov's going to pay you. So, man, hopped a lot of fences, did a lot of surveillance, ran a lot of guns. I'm just saying, man, I'm not embellishing it. It wasn't fucking easy, man. Had to do the cyber shit. Had to fucking do the codes and ciphers. Had to spend money to go to school to study the mathematics of it all and the science behind the shit, man. And, you know, fuck, man. Getting lowballed by different agencies in the beginning, man. Getting, you know, paid small fucking beans, you know, to move up the totem pole, man, to move up the echelon, you know, to get that bigger money in the long run. You know, agencies saying they're going to pay you one thing, you carry out successful operations and the money gets smaller. It's like, come on, man. You know, that changed over time. But in the beginning, man, you know, they'll test you, man. Especially if you had been involved in some on the other side of the law type shit. They want to test your metal, man. They want to see how you're going to react. So, you know, I rolled with all those punches, man. And anyway, so that was then, this is now. Yeah. So, I mean, shit, I'm at the level of fucking senior. And I run the op. I don't answer to anyone. I really fucking don't. I share intel with agencies, but there's no one, you know, in the hierarchy of what I do, you know, I work for myself. I provide a service to the U.S. government. The U.S. government pays me directly. I eliminated middle persons. Yeah, I used to go through other agencies and third parties, man, and they would take a cut. But, yeah, they ain't taking cuts anymore. Nope. Because I run this op. Yeah. So, at any rate, anyway, the point is, man, East Coast culture is a lot different than West Coast culture. Man, look, I have a lot of friends, colleagues, peers from childhood, school, going back, you know, since time immemorial, as I often state and say, time immemorial. You know, man, friends I grew up with, man, since preschool, literally since preschool. And even before then, you know, Head Start, like being kids, like growing up in school before preschool. I'm just saying, I was in Head Start. I went to school before preschool. I went to preschool. And no, I was not a troubled youth. My mother had an opportunity to enroll me in school prior to preschool. So I went to Head Start. Nah, I wasn't a troubled kid, man. I mean, shit, I was in a gang. I mean, you know, shit, half the city I'm from was involved in fucking crime. During the 1980s and 90s, man. You know? The neighborhood was in on it. The town was in on it. I'm just saying. Come on, man. During the Reagan years, I think we all know who was fucking in on it. You know what I mean? But we had to clean up the act, man. You know, we had to clean up the act. We couldn't RICO. RICO ain't cool. It ain't wise. It ain't good. And it ain't fucking kosher. So, that being said, coming from a traditional American family, myself, with a long history of war fighters, long lineage of U.S. patriots, veterans, I had to do something for America, and I mean that genuinely. I mean that sincerely. You know how when you travel, man, you meet people and you try to have a conversation with them, and sometimes, man, you know, you feel bad for some folks, man. You're just like, man, this person is totally superficial. Like, it's a human being and I'm having a conversation. I mean, if you're someone who's not a misanthrope, if you're not a misanthrope and you actually care about humanity, on the other hand, like if you're someone who truly cares about human beings, and you're very empathetic like I am, well, man, you just meet some people, man, and you're just like, man, this person is a simpleton, and I feel sorry for this person. And you try to have a conversation and relate to that person, put yourself in that person's shoes. Some people are not so innocent, and they are superficial, and you just listen to all the shit they talk about. Man, I overhear conversations all the time. I mean, I gather intel. That's my fucking job. So I overhear conversations, man, and I listen to people and the shit they talk about. Their lives of debauchery and shit, man, and just, man, how they're unfaithful to, like, their, like, you know, significant others or their girlfriends or boyfriends, and, you know, just all this kind of shit, man. And I'm just like, you know, this shit is disgusting, dude. The way these fucking people act and behave, man. And just, like, and then other people, like, the type of shit that they want to communicate about, like, that they think is, like, fun to talk about. Look, man, I'm a scientist, you know. I study science, mathematics, codes, ciphers, cryptology. Like, I don't have time for drivel, man. I don't have time for idle fucking chatter. Man, I talk to people who are highly educated, people who work in science, engineering, mathematics. I mean, look, man, I have conversations with folks from all different walks of life and industries. But when a motherfucker wants to engage in some fucking type of, like I said, idle chatter, some jibber jabber, you know, some gibberish, it's just kind of like, dude, what are you doing with your life, man? I mean, for real, why don't you just get your shit straight, man? Just work it out. Man, get your mind, body, and soul right, man. Motherfuckers be having these, like, trivial and pedestrian fucking convos, man. And I'm just like, really? That's how you gentlemen sit around, or that's how you women sit around, and that's what you talk about, man? Man, miss me, man. I don't have time to for some stupid fucking social shit on you know, man, you know, in your group, if that's what the fuck you motherfuckers talk about. Like, I'm out, man. Like, I'm on my own shit. Like, I got other shit to do. I have other fucking priorities than to listen to a bunch of inane nonsense. So, but my point is that on the U.S. East Coast, because people are pro-government, they're not disestablishment, they believe in a strong national defense, they do work on bipartisan issues. I mean, look, man, I know people from the West Coast are like, oh, all of you out there involved in government, you know, it's like evil people. And I'm like, nah, man, look, what you call liberal in Seattle is not the same brand of liberal per se out here. Believe it or not, and despite what you hear in the see, the problem is these motherfuckers watch liberal left-wing news shit. And they're led to believe some shit by their own fucking left that isn't true. So in their minds, they think nothing gets done in terms of government on the East Coast. They have no fucking clue. These clueless people, some of them, those who are clueless, they have no idea that bipartisanship takes place, that liberals and conservatives actually work together in government on the West Coast, or I'm sorry, on the East Coast, and they actually get some shit done. Contrary to some motherfuckers' beliefs. Yeah, see, that's the difference between the West Coast. Their brand of liberalism in Seattle is not the same liberalism here. Yeah, there are folks here from there. And there are people who are similar, but largely it's different out here, man. It's different. I've heard liberals out here say, man, those liberals in Seattle or whatever that's not liberal. I mean, look, there's a difference between being liberal and fucking straight up socialist communist. You see? Yeah, they overlap and they cross over sometimes. Nonetheless, there's a difference between being just a Democrat, like in the old school sense of it, like my friends from childhood, some of them, not all my friends are Democrats, but my friends from childhood, it's different from when people were just normal Democrats. Flash forward to now, where you have characters such as nanny state, batshit fucking crazy out of her mind Pelosi, who's a crazy fucking loon kook on the far extreme left, working with the likes of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and crazy out of her fucking batshit as well fucking mind Rashida Tlaib, and then Ilhan Omar with questionable ties to fucking terrorist organizations, in my professional opinion. So I'm simply saying, man, that's the radical extreme left. And yeah, some of it's out here, some of it's in Seattle, but by and large, the culture out here is hundreds of years of developed versus the Wild West. I'm just saying, man, took me some time to adjust, man, to the East Coast, to get into the flow and the swing of it all, man. It's a different world out here, man. It's a different world out here. Different universe. Hashtag other New Yorks. Hashtag other Americas.